Cruises are meant to be magical. For most people, stepping onto one of these floating cities is like leaving the worries of the world behind. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video. You hear laughter echoing across the decks, smell the salt of the open sea, and watch as the horizon stretches endlessly ahead. Families take photos by the pool, couples sip drinks under the stars, and children marvel at the sheer size of the ship. Life at sea is supposed to be calm, predictable, even a little routine. But sometimes, the ocean writes its own story. And for one young man and the passengers of a Disney cruise ship, an ordinary voyage turned into a nightmarish mystery, one that could have ended in tragedy if not for a few sharp eyes and a bit of luck. It began with the Oasis of the Seas, a luxury liner so massive it resembled a floating theme park. Costing nearly $1.5 billion to build, it was divided into neighborhoods, with everything from zip lines to Broadway theaters, ice rinks, water parks, and pools deep enough to swallow the worries of the world. From Florida, it sailed weekly, carrying thousands of passengers on voyages to sunlit Caribbean destinations. On January 3, 2015, the Oasis set out again, its final stop planned at Cozumel, Mexico. By all appearances, it was another uneventful journey, the kind the crew had done hundreds of times before. But in the early hours of January 7th, something happened that would send shockwaves through both passengers and officials alike. At around 6 in the morning, one passenger, a 22-year-old named Frank Jade, wandered out onto Deck 5. The ship was quiet, the decks nearly empty at that hour, with most passengers still asleep in their cabins. Alone, Frank walked along the rails, and then, in a moment no one fully saw, he disappeared. Cameras later confirmed he had fallen overboard, tumbling into the dark water 8 miles from port. The ocean swallowed him quickly, pulling him away from the massive ship. But what happened next was even more shocking. No alarm was raised. No man overboard announcement echoed through the decks. No searchlights scanned the wave. The Oasis of the Seas continued on its way as if nothing had happened. Frank was left alone in the vast sea, clinging to life as the lights of the cruise ship shrank in the distance. Every minute he floated was another chance for exhaustion, hypothermia, or worse, shark. The waves towered over him, the horizon endless, his voice straining each time he screamed for help. For nearly an hour, he drifted in silence, praying someone, anyone, might notice. And then, by the smallest twist of fate, hope arrived. Another ship, following the same route out of Florida, was making its way past Cozumel. This wasn't just any ship, it was the Disney Magic, another colossal cruise liner packed with families, laughter, and passengers enjoying their vacation. On board, most people were oblivious to the fact that a life was hanging in the balance just beyond the rail. But one couple would change everything. Scott Campbell had stepped out onto the balcony of his cabin when he thought he heard something unusual, something that didn't belong in the rhythm of waves and wind. He froze, listening harder, and then he heard it again. Faint, desperate cries. "Help me!" At first, Scott thought he was imagining it, but when he leaned further, peering into the water below, his stomach tightened. There, bobbing up and down between the waves, was a man, alone. "Stephanie!" he shouted for his wife. Together they stared in disbelief. It was real. Someone was out there, struggling to stay afloat. Stephanie didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and called the crew. Within minutes, the Disney Magic stirred with sudden urgency. Over the loudspeaker came a chilling code. "Mr. Mob, starboard side." The passengers who knew the meaning felt their hearts drop. It was the code for man overboard. Rushing to the deck, passengers crowded to see. Another vacationer, David Hearn, pulled out his camera and began filming. Below, the Disney crew had already lowered a lifeboat into the water. From the surface, Frank watched as the massive shadow of the Disney Magic loomed over him. His arms were numb, his voice hoarse, his body nearly giving out. Yet when he saw the small rescue boat break from the side and head his way, hope surged through him like fire. For the first time since he fell, he believed he might live. The lifeboat cut swiftly through the waves, its engine roaring as the crew leaned over the side, pointing toward the speck in the water. The passengers above held their breath, watching from balconies and railings as the small craft reached the struggling man. Frank's body was nearly limp when the rescuers pulled him aboard. His face was pale, his eyes wide with exhaustion and disbelief. He had been in the water for almost an hour, battling currents and fear, watching his chances fade with every passing second. Yet somehow, against all odds, he had survived long enough to be seen. The Disney magic erupted with relief. Applause broke out along the decks as passengers watched the lifeboat return, carrying the man who had seemed lost to the sea. Some cried, some prayed, and others simply stared, shaken by how close death had come to claiming him. When Frank was lifted aboard, wrapped in blankets and carried gently by crew members, whispers followed him. How did he get there? Was he from this ship? At first, many assumed he must have fallen from the Disney magic itself. The idea seemed too strange that a man from an entirely different vessel could end up drifting in their path. But the truth emerged quickly. He hadn't fallen from their ship at all. He had fallen from the Oasis of the Seas, the massive luxury liner that had sailed away without sounding an alarm, without stopping, without even notifying the authorities. This revelation sent shockwaves through the passengers. The thought was chilling. If not for a lucky moment, if not for Scott Campbell stepping onto his balcony, Frank would have been left behind, swallowed by the sea without anyone knowing. Alfonso Rodriguez, the captain of the port of Cozumel, later confirmed the details. He explained that the alert they received came not from the Oasis, but from Disney's crew. Without them, Frank's disappearance might not have been noticed until it was far too late. The Oasis never informed us, Rodriguez said. We only learned of the missing passenger through Disney. Frank himself was stunned by his survival. He admitted that when he hit the water, the force was brutal, like striking concrete. Many who fall from cruise ships break bones, snap their necks, or are rendered unconscious instantly. By some miracle, he hadn't. Instead, he had surfaced, gasping, and somehow managed to stay afloat. He was taken to a hospital for evaluation, but aside from exhaustion and bruises, he was in remarkable condition. Soon after, he boarded a plane back to the United States, carrying with him not just the scars of a near-death experience, but also the gratitude of a man who had glimpsed death and lived to tell the tale. The Campbell family became unlikely heroes, credited with saving Frank's life simply by noticing what others might have ignored. For Frank, their vigilance and the swift action of Disney's crew was the difference between life and death. But as the story spread, it left behind troubling questions. How could one of the largest and most advanced cruise ships in the world fail to notice a passenger falling overboard? Why wasn't a man overboard alarm sounded? Why didn't the ship stop? For many, the story became less about one man's survival and more about the hidden dangers of luxury travel. Railings, cameras, and security systems, were they truly enough to keep passengers safe? If someone could vanish so easily, what else could slip unnoticed in the vastness of the sea? In the end, though, what people remembered most wasn't the failure of a billion-dollar ship. It was the sight of a young man clinging to life in the ocean, spotted by a stranger on a balcony, and rescued by a crew who refused to let the sea claim another soul. Frank Jade's story remains one of rare survival, a reminder of how fragile life can be on the open water. He had fallen into the silence of the ocean, where thousands of voices on a ship could not hear him. Yet one man did. One voice on one balcony answered his cry, and because of that, he lived. And perhaps, as you drift to sleep tonight, you'll carry with you the mystery of that morning, the endless sea, the fading lights of a ship sailing away, and the miracle of another appearing just in time. A story of despair, luck, and gratitude, carried forever on the tide.